This is FE Peer Review. The date is the 7th of November, 2023. Dr. Jeremiah Johnston is wrong about Alexander the Great. I'll be using a script for this video because I want to keep it concise and on topic. This video is not about the biblical history debate regarding whether Jesus was a historical or mythical figure. My comments apply in either case. This video covers a mistaken claim that I've heard repeated many times now by many people. I'm singling out this example of it because it's a concise and clearly stated example. I got the clip from Godless Engineer's channel, and he provided a link to the original source. So if you're interested in the primary source, you'll find Godless Engineer's video linked in the description and pinned comment below. You can go there and you will find the link to the original full interview. Dr. Jeremiah Johnston is a biblical scholar with a reputable educational background. We see his education here listed on his LinkedIn page. Middlesex University, where he got his PhD, is not a religion-based institution. Dr. Johnston would not have been required to sign anything like a statement of faith, such as are found at many Christian universities. This means that while he was at Middlesex University, he was free to pursue his scholarship without that kind of constraint. I consider that an important and positive point. Now we're going to listen to a clip of what Dr. Johnston had to say.
Yeah,
Well,
but
I mean, and I would just add this too. Don't you also wonder, Cameron? I mean, it's alarming to me how few books people actually read, how people are reading fewer and fewer books. So people are just more moronic when it comes to history. They don't know history. They don't know when World War I was, when World War II was. They don't understand the thought patterns that influence governments and universities. And so, when you tell them something like Arian and Plutarch are the only two sources we have for Alexander the Great, and they write 400 years after Alexander the Great.
Dr. Johnston is very simply wrong. I'm singling him out, but I've heard the same mistaken claim made by many other biblical scholars, and I suspect they're simply repeating what each other says without bothering to check their sources. That is a complete failure in scholarship on their part. At the 24-minute mark in Godless Engineer's video, Johnston says, "It's alarming to me how few books people actually read. People are just more moronic when it comes to history. When you tell them something like Arian and Plutarch are the only two sources we have for Alexander the Great, etc." Johnston is obviously unread on the topic. Should I call him, quote, moronic for being so? I'm not going to stoop to his level, but if that is the standard he has set for others, then he fits his own definition of moronic. We have many more sources for Alexander, including, most importantly, contemporary textual and archaeological evidence. By contemporary, I mean from within Alexander's lifetime and within just a few years of his death within living memory. I'm not going to try to list all of it here, but I want to cover some of the most substantial and easy to find evidence to show that he has not even made a passing attempt to look into this himself. I believe Johnston is simply parroting his like-minded colleagues without checking their sources, which are probably non-existent in that they are all probably just repeating each other. The hypocrisy of this kind of double talk by Johnston, accusing people of being moronic while completely failing in his own example, literally turns me nauseous. It is the epitome of anti-scholarship. So let's set the record straight here. Archaeological evidence. We are looking at British Museum item number 45962. This is a Babylonian clay tablet dating from within 1 or 2 years of the death of Alexander, recording his death. It is essentially a newspaper article, an obituary. It is an official announcement to the Babylonian people that Alexander has died, and was made by people who were alive at the time of his death. Here are some more clay tablets. Again, British Museum, item 36761. This clay tablet documents the Battle of Gaugamela, which was Alexander's defeat of the Emperor Darius III in 331 BC. The tablet was made in the year of the battle, during Alexander's lifetime, recording the event, effectively as it happened. This is called the Priene inscription, and it came from a temple in Priene. British Museum object number 1870 0320.88. It dates from approximately 334 to 330 BCE, which is again during the lifetime of Alexander, and it records his dedication of funds for the construction of the Priene temple. It was actually part of the temple structure itself, a kind of a dedication plaque on the wall, you might say. So again, we have a third physical piece of evidence from Alexander's lifetime, attesting to his existence and his actions as they happened. Another clay tablet, this is the Artaxerxes fragment, and it's also in the British Museum collection. It's the number 36613, and I'll read a little bit of this. According to the Greek historian Arrian, Alexander ordered that the temple dedicated to the supreme god Marduk and the large temple tower next to it were to be rebuilt. When the Macedonian conqueror returned to the ancient city in 323, he noted that not much work had been done yet, and gave new instructions to both the citizens and his own soldiers. The dating of the tablet is not definitive. I will read you a little bit down here about the dating. The document may have been written at the time of the march of Alexander the Great towards Babylon, 331 BC, or it may refer to his return there in 323 BC. So it may have been made actually during those years, but it's also possible, in the next paragraph, we see that it may have been sometime in the following 70 years, a copy recording a bit of past history. So the actual dating of this tablet's not completely certain. It's possible it was from within Alexander's own lifetime. If not, it was within 2 generations of his lifetime, making a copy of something that had already existed. So those are 4 pieces of archaeological evidence, physical archaeological evidence from his lifetime. There is a private collection of ancient documents called the Khalili Collection, owned by Nasser Khalili. And amongst the objects in that collection is a papyrus dating from 324 BCE. This papyrus contains the name of Alexander the Great. This would have been written a year or so before his death. So yet another piece of archaeological evidence from within his lifetime attesting to his existence. There is also a temple in Egypt. Well, I should say in 332 BCE, Alexander was in Egypt, which of course he conquered, and he built a temple there. There's a little page about it here. Temple of Amun and Horus, built by Alexander the Great. There's not much to see of it, but it was built by him during his lifetime, commissioned by him while he was there. So yet more archaeological evidence. In the years immediately after Alexander's death, he, like many political leaders at that time, was deified. He was turned into a god in the minds of the people, and this was often shown by the minting of coins. There are, I think, dozens, perhaps hundreds of coins like this one, showing Alexander as a god. These would have been made within the first couple of decades after his death, so again, within living memory. This particular coin was produced sometime between 305 BC and 281 BC, so about 20 to 40 years after his death. It is also in the collection of the British Museum. So my point here is not to make a case that there's more evidence for the historicity of Alexander the Great than there is for Jesus. That is not an argument that I'm interested in, and that's not the point of this video. My point is very simply that Dr. Johnston mischaracterized the evidence. And he did so negligently, in my opinion, because all of this stuff that I have shown here, I was able to find in a few minutes using a simple Google search. The collections at the British Museum, the Nasser Khalili collection, all of this information is readily available to anybody. You don't even have to be a scholar to find this stuff. So if somebody like Dr. Johnston is going to pontificate using his position of authority as a PhD in biblical scholarship and spout outright bad information, he needs to be called out on it. And that's what I'm doing. Let's go back and listen to that little clip one last time.
Yeah,
Well,
but
I mean, yeah, and I would just add this too. Don't you also wonder, Cameron? I mean, it's alarming to me how few books people actually read, how people are reading fewer and fewer books. So people are just more moronic when it comes to history. They don't know history. They don't know when World War I was, when World War II was. They don't understand the thought patterns that influence governments and universities. And so, you know, when you tell them something like Arrian and Plutarch are the only two sources we have for Alexander the Great, and they write 400 years after Alexander the Great.
When you tell them something like Arrian and Plutarch are the only two sources we have for Alexander the Great, etc., that's an outright falsehood. And coming from a person like Dr. Johnston, I consider that a serious abuse of his authority as a scholar. There are three things I think Dr. Johnston now needs to do as a scholar. Ethical things. First, he needs to publicly admit that he mischaracterized the evidence regarding Alexander the Great. He needs to clarify just how broad that evidence actually is. Second, in order to undo some of the damage he made by spreading this misinformation, he needs to go back to the people he got that misinformation from, and he needs to confront them about it and show them what's correct. And lastly, I think it would make sense if he went back and did an objective, careful analysis comparing the quality and quantity of evidence for the existence and the details of the life of Alexander the Great, and compared that to the quality and quantity of the evidence of the existence and details of the life of Jesus. If he's going to go forward making his case, as he has in the past, I think he's demonstrated that he has not yet done an adequate comparison of those two figures. And maybe it's time that he do that now. That's my suggestion. The ball's in Dr. Johnston's court to do as he sees fit. I hope he follows an ethical path. This is FE Peer Review. Thank you very much, and have a great day. Bye-bye.